Attention darts fans, after searching high and low, to and fro, from coast to coast on Wine and Toast, the award for best hashtag in the game goes to Dynamite Darts Content, and your winner is the weekly Dartscast, baby. 3 words, Dynamite Darts Content. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me as always my co-host, Darts statistician Burton, DeWitt. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. We had the excitement during last week's show of Colchester United winning their cup final and beating Ipswich Town, but no distractions this week for me. It's going to be all about the darts, and we'll get into the show and look back at the weekend. We had the first of 3 World Series events down under, and Michael van Gerwen winning the Queensland Darts Masters, an 8-5 win against Gerwyn Price in Saturday's final. And we'll start the show with our first of 2 questions of the week that we've given to you guys this week. Will Michael van Gerwen regain the world number 1 spot within the next 12 months? What do you reckon?
I mean, if he's going to do it, it will most likely not just be within the next 6 months, but it'll be about 4.5, 5 months from now after the World Championships. And that would be if he becomes world champion. If you look at the rankings as things currently stand, it's a 4-way race for the post-World Championship world number 1 ranking. And if any of 4 people win it, they're not necessarily guaranteed to be world number 1, because there is a huge gap between Peter Wright and the other 3 in it. Meaning if Peter Wright makes the world final, unless someone else has cleaned up everything else as well this year, he's probably going to be the world number 1 come January. But if Peter Wright doesn't make the world final, at least the semifinal, then any of Gerwyn Price, Michael van Gerwen, or Michael Smith could become world number 1 by winning the World Championships. And right now, the person who I would say seems the most likely is Michael van Gerwen. And yes, van Gerwen hasn't been the dominant player that he once was, even in winning 3 television titles on the trot. He had to survive a championship dart from Joe Cullen to win the Premier League. He was more than fortunate at times at the World Match Play, that he was able to even make it through to the latter stages, let alone the final, and win it. And had similar fortune at times in Townsville. But the one thing that he did across at least the latter 2 of those events was he got better as the tournament went along. And he said so himself after the title in Townsville, and he obviously did it as well in the World Match Play. And even in the final, he got better as that match went on. He was averaging in the high 80s. Gerwyn Price was averaging in the mid 80s in the early stages of that match, and that's why he found himself 4-1 down. And yet, when it was all said and done, he averaged just a smidge under 100. That means he averaged well over 100 the rest of the match from there. And he threw some really good stuff. But the consistency isn't what it used to be. And there still are opportunities to knock him out that we haven't seen before from players, or we didn't used to. Obviously, we've seen it for the last couple of years. And that means, will he become world number 1? I don't know. It comes down to playing at his best at the World Championships and playing a little bit more consistent at the World Championships. But if he keeps getting better as tournaments go along, then it's going to be more difficult to knock him out. You're going to have to knock him out in the earlier stages. And that's how things used to be when he was at his best. Usually if he went out, it was an earlier stage with a shorter format where he hadn't yet hit the ground going. That said, back in the day, you might have to average 105 to do it. Now, it might just be in the 90s. But he's playing well enough. He looks like he's, if not the best player in the world, pretty close to the most confident player. And a Michael van Gerwen with confidence is just as dangerous as a Michael van Gerwen playing at his best. So I'm not going to necessarily say yes, but it certainly doesn't seem that far off to think that he will be world number 1 come January.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I wouldn't say with much confidence at the moment that Michael will get that world number 1 spot back within the 12 months. But as you say, I think a lot is going to be dictated to by the World Championship, because that event has so much prize money on offer. And when you compare it to all the other events on the Order of Merit, and I think at the moment, to get to world number 1, you've probably got to win the World Championship or have a World Championship title money on your Order of Merit within the last 2 years. And you look at the rankings now, you've got Gerwyn Price, the 2021 champion at number 1, Peter Wright, the 2022 champion, the reigning champion, he's at number 2, and there's a fairly decent gap from those two to the rest of the field, and Michael being at number 3 at the moment. So I think a lot will come down to the World Championship, and if Michael gets that world title, gets a 4th world title, he could well be world number 1 after it, and that is how he became world number 1 in the first place. He won the first of his 3 world titles at the start of 2014, and that put him to number 1, and he had that 7 years consecutively at the top of the rankings. And then who was the one who replaced him? Gerwyn Price. And how did he do it? He won the World Championship. So I think a lot will come down to the World Championship. But even before then, I think the year that Michael's having so far this year, that was the 8th title that he's won already this season. And you think back to the last couple of seasons, he's not got anywhere near that tally. He's been in the lower single figures. So he is finding that winning touch. But as you pointed out, he's not quite firing on all cylinders. He is showing flashes and spells of it at times, and particularly in the latter stages of matches and tournaments, he is finding that run of legs where he is pulling away from his opponent, or in some cases when he's behind, getting back on level terms and then pulling away. And we saw it in the final as well, and must admit I didn't see a lot of the darts at the weekend, but I was looking back through the live scores, and it did kind of feel like a mini repeat of that World Match Play final between Van Gerwen and Price. Price getting that early lead, punishing those missed doubles from Michael, 4-1 up, but then Michael comes back. He runs off a few legs, and even at the end there he was 5-4 down, and he wins the last 4 legs 15-11, 15-11, and those 2 11 darters were against the throw. So he was putting in some world-class legs against the throw when he needed them the most, and that got him over the line. And the last 4 legs, Gerwyn Price, he had 1 shot at a checkout, and that was a 1-6-4. So it shows you how dominant Michael was at the end of that. So he is winning titles at a lot more regular rate than he has been for the last couple of years, and that's only going to give him confidence. But I think Peter Wright is the one that holds the aces at the moment as far as that world number 1 spot, even though Gerwyn Price has got it at the moment. I think when we come towards the end of the year, when Price is defending that money from a couple of years ago at Ali Pali, that's when we could see Peter Wright maybe steal a march and get that number 1 spot back. But if Michael's coming into the World Championship at the end of the year with, you're probably going to say, double figures in terms of titles, that the confidence is going to be high, and if he gets that 4th world title, that could be enough to get him back to number 1.
Well, we talked about Michael van Gerwen. Obviously, he defeated the world number 1 Gerwyn Price, who was making his first World Series final, excluding the World Series finals themselves. Almost threw his 5th 9-darter of the year in the final as well. But beyond those two, who else caught your eye in Townsville?
We touched on it in last week's show when we were looking ahead to this triple header of events down under, and we were going to see some of the talent from that part of the world. So I'll start there, and we saw 3 of the players, the Australian, New Zealand representatives, come through the first round, and the first of those I've got to mention is Halpai Pua, who's someone that's not new to darts fans. We've seen him play in World Championships, the PDC and the WDF versions, and we've seen him play World Cups, we've seen him play World Series events in the past, but I think his record in World Series events before this one was 0 for 5. So he got his first win in a World Series event, beat Johnny Clayton. Okay, Johnny Clayton wasn't at his best, but you've got to give credit to Halpai there, because 6 out of 11 on the doubles, 8 140s, 2 180s, and apart from a couple of legs in the middle of that game, that's probably one of the best performances that we've seen from him on stage and on TV since he started playing in these TV events over the last few years. And looking away from the PDC, he's had a good run in the WDF events. He's up to number 6 in the world rankings. He's had 4 finals, 2 titles this year in that tour. So he's someone that's getting some results recently, and to back that up on the World Series stage, I think was an impressive win for him. Gordon Mathers, okay, the win against Fallon Sherrick is not one that people are going to be going and rushing back to watch, but he got the win. He did what he had to do, and even the game against Michael Smith, neither of them played at their best, but he managed to get over the line in that one. So 2 wins for him, getting to the semi-finals. I think even though he didn't play at his best in either of those games, should take something from that going into the latter end of the year, when he is going to be looking to try and save his tour card, and he will need more results to do that. And the last of those, Simon Whitlock, someone who's no stranger to these World Series events, but it was the first time that his mum watched him play darts in the World Series, and I think in any event. So that was a special moment for him to get a win in the first round. And aside from those 3, I'll give a mention to Joe Cullen as well, who out of all the players, he's probably feeling like he was maybe the most unlucky not to pick up that title at the end of it, because first round 108 average, second round very impressive win against Dimitri van den Berg. Both of those played well, and even the semi-finals he was 4-3 up, and we saw Michael have one of those spells, the 100 with 2 tops, the 1-2-7 finish, a 14 darter, and finished it up with an 80 finish, 1 dart at top. So he was clinical right at the end, but Joe Cullen played pretty well in that semi-final to not get over the line 7-5 in that one. So yeah, a few players there that definitely caught the eye.
Yeah, and I'm going to start where you finished off. I thought Joe Cullen was the most impressive and best player over the course of the weekend. I mean, look at what he did in the first round against Dave Marline. Granted, he didn't have to do much, but it's really the first time he's brought that A game this year. It's the thing that was missing in the Premier League, and I kept saying it. There's been a better B game and C game over the past year for Joe Cullen than we've ever seen before, but we haven't seen him hit the heights that he's been able to hit. Infrequently, but frequently enough that we know he can do it and can do it on the big stage. He hadn't been able to do it this year. He did it in that first round, and he did it for the most part against Dimitri van den Berg. 2 really good performances, and that second one was against someone who had just won the last 2 World Series events and was throwing it back at him. That was really impressive from Joe Cullen. The semifinals, sure, he didn't get over the line, even though he had the lead early on. But as you mentioned, Michael van Gerwen didn't miss a thing. And it wasn't just from the last few legs. It was the entire match. Michael van Gerwen had 8 darts at double in that match, including the double-double finish. And he hit all 8. That is an absurd thing to do over a match of that distance. And Michael van Gerwen really had to hit 100 or pretty close to 100% of his doubles to win that match because Joe Cullen was playing better. It just so happened that Van Gerwen kept hitting at whenever he had a chance and created chances as well. You mentioned the 1-2-7. I think that was really a turning point because Cullen was waiting on a fairly simple 2-darter. And that came the leg after the 100 where Joe Cullen was waiting on a fairly simple 2-darter. And what was a really scrappy leg up until that point. Van Gerwen did not look likely up until that point. But I thought it was a really impressive performance by Joe Cullen across the 3 matches. And he will feel hard done because he was the best player in Townsville. You mentioned some of the local players. I fully agree with that. I mean, Haupai-Pua, that's the best we've seen from him on television. Sure, Johnny Clayton didn't play great, but I don't think it mattered. Haupai-Pua played very well in that match and was a deserved winner. Gordon Mathers, he got through to the semifinals, didn't really hit his top stride in either of those matches, but he still found a way to win against someone who made a World Series final just a year ago and against a player who has won a World Series event this year. Damon Hedda, sure, he went out first round, but that was one of the matches of the tournament. That match against Gezi, they just kept hitting each other. And in the end, Gezi lifted his game and was able to win, even though he let Hedda back into the match in that last leg. But it was a very good performance from Damon Hedda between 2 players who looked the part and performed. But I'll end where I started. Joe Cullen really did look the best player this weekend, and it wasn't many of his own mistakes that led to him not winning the title. It was that Michael van Gerwen couldn't afford any mistakes and didn't make any.
And the World Series continues this weekend with the New South Wales Darts Masters, and let's get to our first guest on this week's show, a player that will be playing in that event this weekend, his first World Series event for 4 years. Here's our chat with Raymond O'Donnell. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the players making their return to the World Series stage next weekend, Raymond O'Donnell. Thanks for the time, Raymond. How are you doing?
Yeah, not doing too bad at the moment. Thank you.
Good to hear. And let's start with the World Series. Next weekend, you'll be playing in the New South Wales Darts Masters, your first appearance in a World Series event for 4 years. How are you feeling just a week away now from that return to the big stage?
Yeah, I'm feeling quite calm and good at the moment. Probably a bit more, excited the next couple of days just out from it. Probably a little bit nervous by the last day, I suppose. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we'll come back to the World Series later, but let's first circle back to the start for you in darts. How old were you when you discovered darts? How did you get introduced to the game?
It's a bit of a long story, but I'll give it a go for you. I was about 17, 18 years old. I was introduced by my best mate that was a junior champion in town and his whole family was playing darts at that time, and my goal was just to beat him, and used to muck around with the ex-father-in-law until my uncle's team was short one night, and I joined their team and fell in love with it.
So from that age, was it just playing in leagues, tournaments? Was it just playing with friends and family? Where did it go from there?
No, just playing with friends and family and local pub darts, which is, mainly our comp. We had like 60-something teams in Broken Hill at one stage there, all different divisions. Started in the second highest, and then went straight to the highest in the first 6 months.
I was looking through some of your early results, and you were making deep runs as far back as 2005, 2007, around that time. What are your earliest memories of going to tournaments, testing yourself against some of the best players that Australia's got to offer?
Yeah, I started travelling with my uncle, who was he was playing state for South Australia for about 14 years. He was a great player himself, and started practicing with him, and we done a lot of travelling into open tournaments and travelling around Australia. We've probably roughly done, 200,000 kilometres over a 10-year period, and he was a, state player himself.
2009, you were winning titles on the AGP Tour, picking up the NDDA Open, the Victoria Open titles that year. What did those wins mean to you at the time?
Oh, it meant the world to me, to win titles and that. My first one was very emotional, because, I've made a lot of semi-finals and never thought I was ever going to get there. And when I first cracked my first win, I thought, well, I can mix it with the big guys. And, so that was about it. Just stuck with it.
Paid off, and fast forward a few years to 2014, one run I've got to mention, the Australian National Championships, making it all the way to the final before falling short to Eddie Sims in that final. What are your memories of that day?
I just think I was outplayed by Eddie that day. I was hot going into it the day before. It was a good experience to play on the stage. I just thought he outplayed me, played pretty well, so credit to Eddie Sims.
And a few years later, you get that first taste of the big stage on TV, playing in the Melbourne Darts Masters 2018. Before then, you'd been playing well on the DPA circuit, a lot of quarterfinals, semi-finals. What did it feel like coming through that qualifier to book your spot in the World Series?
Yeah, that was great. That was a rough that was a long week, and finally ended up scraping through, and I enjoyed the experience playing Barney up there. It was great. I thought, didn't take my chances, and I thought of the finish line too early, and that's where he came back.
Yeah, it was the Battle of the Raymonds, you against Raymond van Barneveld in that Melbourne Darts Masters. Firstly, what was that experience like, the walk-on, then watching Raymond walk out, getting ready to play one of the legends of the game?
Oh, I was just excited, to finally watch him, I used to watch him on the VCR and all that, and to actually meet him in real life and to watch him come out, it was pretty awesome, and to be up there, because you'd never thought you'd meet these players, and it was just great to meet them and to play against. And
you mentioned the game, it was a close one, just losing out 6-4. What was it like, that first taste of playing in the World Series?
Oh, it was great. I was just a little bit sort of overwhelmed at first, and then sort of tried to settle in, but yeah, I think he played better in the back end of it, but the experience overall was great. The fans were awesome, the crowd was good. It's just probably the odd, when the crowd is all going, it's all good, but then, if that odd person's out, just sort of enough to could put you off.
And a year later, you were winning titles again, this time 2 on the DPA circuit. Then 2020, we see the world shut down due to the pandemic. What was that time like for you? Did you play much at home and online, or did you take a break from playing?
I really took a break. I tried to give the online a go. It was middle of the winter, and I tried to give it a go, and I was in the shed, no heater, and I'd give it a crack, and it wasn't for me. It's just it was too slow, there was a bit of lag, and I thought, I'll just wait till the darts start back, because we thought, maybe this is 12 months and then 2 years. So sort of it really didn't touch a dart for nearly 2 years.
So then you come back, and last year and this year we've seen the DPA running a satellite tour. You won an event last year. What has that been like to play in?
Yeah, that was good. Because of the lockdowns and some of our borders were shut, I decided to go up to Queensland and play some of the top players up there, and yeah, to win the first one was good, and I've done the same thing this year as well. It's just that I went walkabout after the first competition.
Well, let's get back to the World Series. And a few weeks ago, we saw the qualifiers put on for the Queensland, the New South Wales events, as well as the Satellite Tour final. So it was a long week of darts. How were you feeling going into that week?
Well, when I was going into it, I decided to, I got sort of pushed to sort of go down. There was 3 days left, and I didn't play in all of them. I just decided to go on the last 3 days. I had a funeral on a Friday. I think I flew on a Saturday, so I got to play Sunday, Monday and Tuesday without no practice. It was also not the darts opportunity to play darts. It was also great to catch up with some people I've been missing for a while, so it was great to catch up with them as well.
And I was looking at your run in that qualifier that you won, and apart from one game, it looked like you strolled through it. So let's start with the outlier in that run, 6-5 against Matt Mullen in the second round. How tough was that game to get through?
Oh, it was tough. It's always hard playing your teammates. We're sponsored by the same bloke, and we were both struggling on doubles, and I think we're both as nervous as one another, because that's how it's like when you're playing your mates. And it was good to get the win, but Matt's a great person on and off the board, so we support each other.
And the next 3 games, 6-1, 6-1, 7-0 in the final to get through. What was that feeling like when you got over the line to get that second appearance in the World Series and your first for 4 years?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to be pretty quite honest with you. I thought I was actually playing in the semi, and I didn't know I actually won it until they wanted to do an interview after, and I thought, I've got a final to play, and they said, Bubba, that was the final. I go, was it? So then I got a little bit emotional, so I thought, really? So I didn't know it was actually the final. I just thought I was playing in the semi, and that was honest. So when it was over, I thought, well, that's a bit of a shock, because it shocked me as well.
Is that the first time you've done that, where you've not realised that you were in the final?
Yeah, I just had my head down on the floor a fair bit, and I didn't look around, because I did see the game beforehand, and I thought that was to play each other to go for the final, and that was actually the game before where the winner was playing me, and I didn't realise that, so I went for a walk and came back and played that game, and I didn't know it was actually the final, so it was probably good for me not to know in one way, I guess.
Well, we've got to mention as well the shirt that you wore in your first World Series appearance in Melbourne, a very jazzy shirt. Can we expect something similar next week?
No, this year, that was a representation of me self and my children's names and all that, and my nickname's Bubba, so I went with the baby and my kids' names, which I thought was a pretty cool shirt. Everyone wants one still today, but I'm going back to my Indigenous roots, my totem, and my sister always wanted to be an eagle if she came back, so the eagle represents her and that, so I'm sticking to my Indigenous side.
Very nice. Well, when we're talking, the draw isn't out yet, but is there any of the PDC players that you'd most like to have a chance to play on the stage?
I like to play them all, to be honest, but I know that can't happen, but I just think there's no one, everyone's playing pretty well, as I can see from the other night, because I don't normally watch darts, but I tried to watch it to get a bit of taste to see what I was in for. I've seen a lot of people performing pretty well at high standards, and I just hope I go in with my head cool and not as nervous, and hopefully I can give them a run.
Definitely. Well, what's the plan then between now and Friday? You're going to be putting in more hours on the board. How does the preparation look like for you ahead of getting back on the stage?
Preparation for me is like when I do a tournament, I don't practice much anymore. I done all that when I was younger and used to put in 8 to 6 hours a day, and now it's like down to like a couple of hours a month or something. But on Tuesday I'll probably put in a couple of hours, and Wednesday, then have Thursday off for the meet and greet. But the couple of hours will be not straight up, it'll be probably in half an hour, and then switch and stop and have a break, and then go back and have another go, so play hot and cold, if you know what I mean.
And lastly, before we let you go, beyond next weekend, what have you got coming up darts-wise for the rest of the year? Any tournaments you've got your eye on?
No, there's not at the moment. I'm just taking each day by day, and if there's any that pop up that interest me, I'll go down and roll the arm over.
Well, Raymond, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We appreciate your time, and congratulations again on qualifying for the World Series again, and we wish you all the best for that second World Series for you next week.
Yeah, well, thank you for the phone call. I don't have many interviews. But also I'd like to thank you for doing this interview with me. And if I can just take the time to mention my only sponsor, Greg Walsh. He's the manager of the team Misfits. Without his continuous support and belief in all of us, we wouldn't be. He goes far and beyond for us all, and without his continued support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, and that's just to play darts. And that's what he does. Is a great team leader, and he helps us to just focus on our darts and our darts only, and that's great. Never met anyone like it, so this is great.
Thanks again to Raymond for joining us. Now onto some other darts that's going on this weekend, and we're going to see the return of the development tour, the fourth of 5 weekends of the season. We've got 5 events going on in Germany this weekend, and brings us to our second of our questions of the week. Who is going to finish top of this year's development tour?
Well, right now it's really close between 3 players, but it doesn't mean it will be those 3, because there's a bevy of players not at that far back who, if they win a pair of titles this weekend, could find themselves topping the order of merit entering the final weekend. But right now there are 3 that are all within less than 1,000 pounds of one another. Keane Barry, who of course we know not just from the development tour, but from his successes on the senior tour, only making a major semifinal earlier this year. Nathan Rafferty, who similarly we've seen him do really good things on the senior tour, and Garrett Nenches, who we've seen start to make strides on the senior tour and is right there in the running to make the World Championships by right, even if he doesn't get one of the development tour spots. And those 3 are all within under 1,000 pounds of one another. And therefore, they should be the favorites. And of them, Keane Barry, who has a lead of 600 pounds, not just has that lead, but has to be considered the favorite. He hasn't played all the events, and yet he's ahead as things currently stand. He has the second highest average of anyone on the development tour this year, behind one player who I'll mention in a second. Who's 3rd and 4th in that? Well, they're the other 2 people I mentioned, Garrett Nenches, who's 3rd in averages, and Nathan Rafferty, who's 4th, which means that those players at the top have also been those that have been, at the very least, average-wise, doing the most so far. But Keane Barry, the fact that he's leading it so far, the fact that he's leading it having played only 2/3 of the event so far, is impressive. And he is also the player who has the most success and experience on the senior tour to boot. If he's able to go and play the last 2 development tour weekends, I think he will do enough to not just maintain his lead and grow it. Because, I mean, all of these players are really good, but even at that level, he is a man amongst boys. He is a star in the making, if he's not a star already. But I do want to focus on the player who's leading the averages so far and who's currently 4th on the list, barely more than a title in a semifinal, or barely less rather than a title in a semifinal behind Keane Barry, and that's Josh Rock. Josh Rock has nearly a full point on Keane Barry so far this year in the development tour, and well more than a point on everyone else. And he's managed to be 4th right now, just less than 2,500 pounds off the top of the order of merit, not just playing fewer events than Keane Barry. Not just playing the same amounts as Keane Barry, but playing fewer. He's barely played half. He's been in 8 of the 15, and yet he's right there in the race. Josh Rock on the senior tour this year has been better than anyone else who's development tour eligible, even better than Keane Barry. He's really looked like one of the best players in the world. And I'm not just saying, a top 32 player. He's really looked like a top 16 player at times. And he's been very unfortunate not to have been closer to qualifying for the World Match Play, the World Grand Prix. It seems almost every weekend there's some Players' Championship event where he's averaging north of a ton and losing to someone who is just somehow doing the exact same thing back at him. It's been a lot of unfortunate results for Josh Rock that has kept him from being the newcomer of the year so far, even though performance-wise he has. If anyone's going to reel in Keane Barry, it's Josh Rock. But I think what's more likely is that both of those 2 will pull away because they are the 2 best on the development tour this year by a country mile and then some. I think Keane Barry holds on. And I think Keane Barry widens on everyone else. But I think Josh Rock, if he's able to play the development tour, is going to stick pretty darn close to him. And those 2 will finish 1-2 with a gulf back to 3rd.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Josh Rock is definitely going to have a say in these last two weekends if he indeed does play both of the weekends. And looking at our poll at the moment, which is running on Twitter, I did put the top three as things stand: Keane Barry, Nathan Rafferty and Gert Nenches on there, and then put other on there as well. So you've got at the moment Keane Barry 53%, Nathan Rafferty 23%, Gert Nenches 17%, and other 7% at the moment. And our listeners getting in touch as well. We've got Andrew Kinsman, who you mentioned Josh Rock already. Josh Rock has only played 8 of the 15 events, as you mentioned, and lies in 4th place. If he's able to make the rest of the tour, he could win it. And yeah, I think he is someone that, like I say, is going to have a say in these last 2 weekends of the season. And he's only got to go and do what he did in that first weekend. His first weekend playing on the development tour, winning 2 titles, making a final. Of course, he missed that second weekend, and that second weekend, we saw 5 different winners from the 5 events. The third weekend, the most recent one, Keane Barry doing what Josh Rock did in the first weekend, winning 2 titles and getting to another final. And I think that's where it could all come down to, is how these finals play out, because you look at the prize money on offer in these development tour events, $2,000 for winning one, £1,000 for getting to the final. So that's a huge difference between a final runner-up and winning the title. And we even saw it in the last event, Keane Barry getting to that final, winning the title, and that win put him above Nathan Rafferty. And that's how close it could turn out to be. It could all come down to a final win in who wins that one game, not based on who plays, who gets further in the earlier events, who gets to loads of quarterfinals. It could come down just to one final alone. And I think, yeah, Josh Rock, we look at how he's played on the Pro Tour this year and looking at his averages on the Players' Championships, 96.5, which is 6, almost 7 points higher than what he's averaging on the Development Tour. So if he can bring that sort of standard to the Development Tour these last 2 weekends, I think he's going to take some stopping. And we've seen him average 121 on the Pro Tour as well. We've seen him make some deep runs and really push some of these top players and get some wins against them as well. So I think, for me, I'm like you. I think it is going to be a top 2 of Keane Barry and Josh Rock. And you went with Keane Barry experience-wise. I'll be different. I'll say Josh Rock is going to claw back that deficit at the moment, and he's going to be the one to finish top. So, like you, I'm going with the same top 2, but I'm going to go in the other order.
And I would not be surprised if you're right and I'm wrong this time around. Now we'll do one more question before we go on to listener questions. But for the first time in a while, it won't be a PDC question or a senior tour question. It'll be a WDF question, which we've really not spoken about, I think, at all since the World Championships a couple months ago. But at the time of recording, we've not heard any details on their plans for the 2023 World Championship. And knowing our luck, that means right after we finish recording, we'll announce it, thus mooting this question. But knowing that that's the case and we'll be made to look fools between the time we record and we publish this, are you surprised that nothing has been announced yet?
Yeah, I hope we are made to look like fools and they do announce something, because for me personally, it is a little bit surprising that we've not heard anything yet. And we've not spoken a lot about the WDF since Lakeside, but they have still been fairly busy, the tour. There's been events around the world virtually every weekend. There've not been many weekends where there's not been some action around the world, which carries the WDF ranking points. And just a few highlights really from the last few months. We had the Dutch Open, of course. We had Jelle Klaassen on the show after he won that title. The Welsh Open weekend, we had Bo Greaves and Fallon Sherrick playing in a final on stream and one of the games of the year. And then more recently, the Australian Open, which is a platinum event. So one of the bigger events on the WDF circuit. We saw Bo Greaves and Mikuru Suzuki go head-to-head for the first time in a while, and that was another high-quality game. But I think the Australian event, if you weren't in Australia, it was hard to watch the stream, so that was a bit disappointing, and not to see any highlights or anything from that was a shame. But looking at the World Championship, and we are seeing players win some of these big events in the WDF, which do carry that automatic spot in their World Championship, Jelle Klaassen being an example of one. And it's kind of a little bit of a concern, isn't it, that players are winning these events, qualifying for the World Championship, when we don't know, A, when it's going to be. Is it going to go back to that January slot that the BDO used for all those years, or are they going to stick with the April slot, which for me I thought worked quite well, although logistics-wise with Q School and losing players, if players get tour cards, could be a bit of an issue there. And B, where's it going to happen? Is it going to be at Lakeside again, or are they going to go somewhere else? And we had Jason Francis on, who runs the World Seniors. They had an event at Lakeside this year, and he was disappointed with the ticket sales at Lakeside. And the WDF got to be the same as well, haven't they? Because there was a lot of empty seats at Lakeside that week as well. So I think at the moment things, are undecided. And when we've spoke to the WDF in the past, Richard Ashdown, he said they're not going to announce things that aren't signed and sealed. We've seen that in the past with the BDO, where they made loads of promises, turned out to be false promises, said all these things were going to happen, and they never did. And I think that is the right way to go for the WDF. They don't want to start doing that and announcing loads of things that don't end up happening. So I think no news means nothing has been confirmed yet. And with an event like this, you've got the dates, the venue, but also TV as well. You want this event to be on Eurosport again or another broadcaster and be able to show, because that is important for the WDF. So at the moment, we don't know anything where it's going to be, when it's going to be, but hopefully we're going to find out soon. And yeah, it's been 4 months since Lakeside, no news yet. Hopefully whatever it is that is holding the WDF back from announcing something, that gets resolved, and maybe we'll find out this week before the show comes out. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully something will get announced soon.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, in fairness to the Lakeside for the WDF World Championships, the change from January to April certainly didn't help. Because you look at, in January, okay, it is after New Year, but you still are able to plan it around your holiday travels and your holiday scheduling, as opposed to April, where, okay, sure, there's Easter, but that's not a holiday that people travel for as much. And it does make it more difficult. But that said, the ticket sales didn't look all that wonderful even prior to the postponement of the event to April to begin with, due to the Omicron variant. And that does raise questions about, is there a better place or better time for the WDF to stage the event so that they can get a crowd that will justify it? But that question has two answers. The answer, yes, there is. Then you have to then ask where could that be? But if the answer is no, then the question then becomes, is it worthwhile to still have a WDF World Championship? And we've seen some of the other organizations that have popped up decide they don't want to have a World Championship because 2 or 3, if you include the senior one, is enough, if not more than enough, to begin with. And maybe just having a different year-end event that isn't a World Championship might be the better way to go about it, to have just the World Masters and maybe put a little bit more money and time into that event than a World Championship. But that, again, depends on what the answer to the question is. And I'm sure the WDF is considering, is a World Championship worth it? Is there a way that we can make the World Masters bigger? And even though that might mean fewer televised events, fewer prestigious premier events, we can use our resources to make whichever we do decide to go forward in all that much better for the players and for the fans that choose to come to it. I don't know the answer to those questions, but I'm sure they're considering them because they haven't made an announcement. Yeah, it very well could be that they have a better location than the Lakeside. It could very well be that they think that they can make the Lakeside work when we're not dealing with an event in April or dealing with an Omicron variant that we don't know. Based on at the time that they postponed it, we don't know what it's going to mean to the pandemic as things were at the time. So I think there's a lot of things that they need to consider, and there's a lot of questions they should be asking. Maybe the answer is to move the event like the World Masters out of England. The English market, for many reasons, is saturated. Most of those reasons are the PDC. Sure, the PDC have the European tour, but beyond that, there aren't that many televised events in Europe. There's the European Championship, there's the World Cup, there's some World Series events, and there's a couple nights of Premier League each year. But there's a huge market in the Netherlands. There's a huge market in Germany. There's markets emerging elsewhere. And now also you can add in Ireland now that the World Grand Prix has moved, at least for another year, from Dublin to Leicester. So there's markets that don't have as much major events that maybe would make sense to move the World Championships to if the Lakeside is not feasible. And maybe the WDF is considering that. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not all that surprised that they haven't announced something yet, because they had a lot of questions to ask themselves after the event in April. And as you said, they don't want to put out information until they know what's going to happen, at least barring another setback in the global pandemic like happened this past year. So I'm not that surprised they haven't put something forward. I don't know what's going to happen, but I would hope and I believe that they're asking all the right questions to make sure that every realistic possibility is on the table, and they've considered everything they need to give this event, assuming it goes forward, the best chance it has for success.
And now we'll move on to our next guest on this week's show. He made his mark in the UK Open as one of the Riley's qualifiers earlier this year. He's also made 2 finals on the WDF circuit. Here's our chat with Graham Hall. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by last week's Online League champion, Graham Hall. Thanks for the time, Graham. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. And well, let's start with that win last week, winning the weekly title on Saturday night. You're through to the Champion of Champions week of the Online League. How pleased were you with last week's work in Southampton?
Yeah, I was really pleased with my performance, the way I played all week, really. I think it had been coming for a while on the Online League, because I've been down there a couple of times before. Played well, but not quite got the results that I wanted. And this time, yeah, everything went my way, really.
A lot's been going your way this year, which we'll come on to talk about. But let's circle back. I was reading, I think you started darts, you were quite late into the game, in your late teens. How did you get into the game?
Well, all my friends used to like playing computer games and things like that, but one of my pals had a dartboard up in his bedroom, and I used to stand on there for hours while everyone else was playing a computer, really. That's about it.
So you weren't very good at the computer games? You wanted something else to do?
Oh, no, I was absolutely useless.
So from that point then, starting to play a little bit of darts, where did it go from there? Where was the progress from there? Was it into a league, joining a team?
Yeah, just went into local leagues and things like that. Realised I was quite good because I was beating people that had been playing for quite a while, and yeah, then it obviously went on to county and things like that. And yeah, just progressed from there, really. Had a pop at Q school and things like that. Yeah, really enjoyed the game from then. So
from those early years, playing in leagues and then going on to play county, talk us through that time. What are the highlights that have really stuck through those early years of getting into darts?
Oh, God knows. Now you put me on the spot. Well, mainly it was going to local tournaments, really, after doing a bit of county and things like that, winning local comps and things like that. So,
do you remember the first competition that you won?
You know, I couldn't actually tell you.
Well, you mentioned as well that you had a go at Q School in 2013. What persuaded you back then to give it a go?
Just all my pals and stuff, really. They're all like, they thought I was good enough to give it a go. So, yeah, I just thought, why not? Let's give it a go. I think one of the days I made the last 32, and I had quite a good run there, but wasn't quite meant to be that year. So
later that year, you won your first PDC title on the Challenge Tour, and I was looking back through your run, beating Jan Decker in the semi-finals, Ross Smith in the final. How special was that day?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Believe it or not, I actually thought there was another game after Ross Smith. I thought that was the semi-final, but I was told that it wasn't. It was the final. And yeah, I was really chuffed after that.
And a few years later, 2015 was your first crack at a PDC major. You come through the qualifiers to get to the UK Open, and I remember our chat in Minehead a few months ago, you said that first UK Open you were quite nervous that day, but did that first taste, I guess, of the big time give you a look into what could a darts career look like for you?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Definitely put it all into perspective, really. Definitely.
We have to fast forward a few years for your next go at Q School 2020. During that time, in between those years, did you think about having another go at Q School? Was it just playing local darts? What kept you from having another go in between those two times?
I was just playing local stuff at the time, and I didn't feel as good. I went for a bit of a bad patch at the time, and finally got it back on track, and then finally gave it another go after that. But it took me a while to get my head around it when my darts wasn't going right. But now I'm back playing well again, putting the time in. Everything seems to be going well.
Yeah, it definitely is. And after that second go at Q School 2020, of course, the world shuts down. What was that time like for you in terms of the darts? Did you get a lot of time to practice, or did you use it to take a break?
No, I actually played a lot of the online darts, and so it was pretty much more practice for me. If anything, it helped me. I think a lot more practice with friends and stuff like that online, and everyone had the time off then, didn't they?
Fair enough. Well, fast forward to this year, and you were back at Q School, and we've seen you make a lot of strides this year. Getting back to Q School and having a go at the Challenge Tour this year, was that always the aim for this year, to try and get to more events?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to do the Challenge Tour, but unfortunately I couldn't do Germany after the first Challenge Tour event because I hadn't had my jabs, so that was a bit of a knock to me this year on the Challenge Tour, but yeah, that's how it goes sometimes with the COVID and stuff.
Well, you did have a quarter-final on the Challenge Tour earlier this year, and then of course the UK Open, you were back in that, and what a run you had in that first afternoon session. Andrew Gilding, Kevin Burness and Steve Beaton as well to get through to the fourth round. What was it like for you then, watching that draw for the fourth round, because people call it the FA Cup third round when all the big names come in? What was it like watching that and waiting for your name to come out?
I was just hoping to get on the big stage, really. Unfortunately, that didn't quite happen, but I'd have rather one of the bigger names to get on that stage, really, just to get that bit of experience.
I remember when we spoke in the players' room after you won your 3 games, you weren't sure if you had any more games to play, but that was it for the afternoon. So how did you find having that break before coming back to play again in the evening?
Yeah, it was nice to have the break, actually, and go back to my room and actually watch a bit of it on the telly, watch the draw and stuff. Yeah, it was quite exciting.
And it was Keane Barry in the evening session in that fourth round. He, of course, went on to make the semi-finals that weekend, but you did run him close in that game, 10-7. You averaged 95 in that game as well. So, leaving Minehead, what were the main takeaways from the whole experience that day?
Oh, I took loads of positives away from that. My confidence grew, and going to other tournaments after that, all my local tournaments, I just seemed to be winning everything. I was just that full of confidence, and I think it's definitely built me as a player at the moment. It's definitely pushed me on.
Yeah, we've seen you kick on, and not long after that you did get the call up to play in a handful of the Players' Championship events as well. Obviously you've had the experiences of the UK Open, but what was it like walking into that room to play in those events for the first time?
For the Pro Tour, I absolutely really enjoyed the Pro Tour. Brilliant setup, and I just felt like I belonged there, really. So hopefully one day that's where I'll permanently be.
Yeah, definitely. And you got a chance to play some of the bigger names, if you like. James Wade, Joe Cullen, the Premier League players there, Ryan Searle as well. How much did you take away from those opportunities to go up against the real top names?
Oh, I took loads from that. I did miss a few opportunities against them, but I don't know, really. It was just on the day that they just played that little bit better than me. Took out crucial shots at crucial times, but I suppose that's what they do.
And away from the PDC, we've seen you been busy on the WDF circuit as well, making 2 finals, the Welsh Classic, the England Open, just being picked in deciders in both of those finals. Have you got your eye on the WDF World Championship? Is that a target for yours?
Yeah, definitely for this year. I probably could have done with doing a few more events, really, but I think I'm going to do myself for Coombe and the Bridlington, and I'm considering going to Sweden this month as well. Hopefully I'll get the opportunity to go there and try and pick up a few more points and try and cement my place in the WDF World Championship. That's the goal for this year, definitely.
Excellent. And you've also, on top of that, been playing a lot of local opens as well. We often see your name pop up when you've won a title or made a final. Do you know roughly, I guess, in terms of all the darts that you've played this year, just how many tournaments you've played? Are we looking at 3 figures already?
It probably wouldn't be far off. I've played in that many tournaments. It's pretty much every weekend, probably 2 a weekend at the moment. I do have quite a lot of success in them as well, so a lot of positives to take from it all.
Is there a particular win that most stands out, you're most proud of from this year so far?
Probably the Modus Online weekly finals. That one's the one that sticks out for me at the moment. That was the biggest one for me.
And in terms of the darts, obviously you're playing a lot more darts, probably more darts this year than you've ever played. What's that like, juggling the darts, trying to push on your career in darts, but also the work balance as well. How difficult has that been?
Yeah, it's quite tiring, really. It's getting up to practice. Once you've been to work and stuff, you've got to push yourself when you get back and to put in that bit of time afterwards. Luckily, I work for myself, so I can have quite a bit of time off when I want. So, yeah.
That's always good. And have you noticed yourself, your game improving as you're playing a lot more this year in any particular areas? Has it been more consistency on the scoring, the doubles, or just in high pressure situations in games you noticed you've been more clinical?
Well, lately, I think the scoring's always been there. It was my doubles that let me down a few times at crucial times. But I think now, as I'm getting a bit further on, getting more experience, the doubles and finishes are coming quite a bit more regular now, getting a bit more consistent.
And we have to mention as well, last month off the Oki signing up with Mission, the darts manufacturer. Are there any plans yet to get your own darts made? Is that in the pipeline?
Yeah, they're actually in the process of making me a set of darts at this moment in time. Just waiting to see what they come back with. The designs are all there, so just waiting to see what they come back with now.
So you've got Mission on board. Any other sponsors that have come on board these last few months, or are you still on the lookout for sponsors to help you?
At the moment, I've always been with BS Promotions for the last year. Bob, he actually helps me out quite a lot, to be honest. Helps me get to all my PDC events and things like that. And to have Mission on side now as well for all my equipment and things like that. Yeah, it's brilliant. Really happy at the moment. And
sticking with the support, we should mention as well your partner Amanda. How much of a support has she been, and also family, friends behind the scenes as well?
Oh yeah, she has to put up with quite a lot. I mean, well, I'm never at home. So yeah, she's good really.
When you are home, we do see you like a bit of karaoke as well. Do you get up on and sing any songs? Have you got a particular song you go to?
Oh no, you wouldn't see me up there on the karaoke. I could stand there in front of 10,000 people and play darts, but I couldn't stand up there in front of 5 for karaoke. That's definitely not for me.
Well, just looking ahead then to the rest of the year, obviously you've got the Champion of Champions coming up in the online league. You're looking to play some more WDF events as well. What are you most looking forward to in terms of events you've got for the rest of the year?
The two main ones I'm looking forward to is obviously the Modus Champions Week in mid-October, and hopefully trying to qualify for Lakeside as the WDF. That would just top it all off for me, really, to get up there on that stage. So, apart from getting a Q card in January, which would be brilliant, but up until then, yeah.
Plenty to aim for, and I guess really now we've got a lot more darts that's come back since the long break. It's good for you, isn't it, to have all these opportunities to play, and even not having a tour card, you're able to still get to plenty of events in loads of different organisations and still make that progress at the same time.
Yeah. Modus helps a lot, really, because it's such good practice. You're playing with such quality players week in, week out. Couldn't really ask for any better, really.
Well, Graham, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We appreciate your time. Congratulations on everything you've already achieved so far this year, and we wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2022 as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks again to Graham for joining us. Now we're going to finish up the show with a couple of listener questions. The first one comes from Gordon Skinner, who says, do you think there's a way to change up the World Series to give the local players more of a chance to consistently get to the latter stages, maybe have 3 separate nights like the Premier League instead of the current format?
It's an interesting question, but I think where I will disagree with the question is the premise that they don't have much of a chance to consistently get to the later stages. Sure, in almost every match, the PDC professional is going to be the favorite over the local players. But as we've seen year in, year out, the local players have been getting better and are becoming more consistent. And having the event such that it is a straight shootout for them, if they lose, that's it, has made them have to find ways to get the best players in, and it's made them have to come and play their best game to win. And as we saw, 3 of them did. And it very nearly would have been more. Damon Hedda had every chance to defeat Gerwyn Price. And if he did that, that would have meant 3 of the 4 in the bottom half would have been the local players. Bailey Marsh took Michael Van Gerwen to a last leg decider. Sure, Van Gerwen didn't play great, but Bailey Marsh played out of his skin at times to stay in that match and to force Van Gerwen. Obviously, early on, he had the lead. I think that the local players have every chance to succeed in it. And we've seen before, we talked about it last week, 2 of them have gone on to lift the title. Both of those, of course, were either then, in terms of Kyle Anderson, or in Damon Hedda, a future PDC professional. But I think we'll see similar possibilities come out of some of the other locations as well. We've seen, obviously, as well in the German Darts Masters, Gabriel Clemens make the final. And we've seen good performances from the North American and the Nordic players. We didn't see it in the Asian ones as much, but I think that was a happenstance of it just didn't happen. I think there's enough really good players playing in Asia that if the PDC brings back the World Series events, whether it's in Japan or somewhere else, that we will see players not just win a match, but put in runs. I think that they're good enough. I think the consistency's there, and I don't think a change in format's necessary to make it more likely, because I think at least the better players who qualify, and that's not just 1 or 2 in some of these events, but 4 or 5 of them, are good enough to not just win a match, but go deep.
Yeah, I think the format, the way these World Series events run at the moment, is quite a good format. And looking at how the format in terms of legs has changed, I mean, that's changed a few times already this year. We saw the US Darts Masters 1st to 6 in the first round, all the other rounds 1st to 8. The Nordic Darts Masters 1st to 6 first round, and then it was 1st to 10, 1st to 11 for the latter stages. And the last couple of events, the Dutch Darts Masters and the one we've just had in Australia, that was 1st to 6 first round, and then 1st to 6, 1st to 7, 1st to 8, mirroring the Euro Tour final day format for that one. So we have seen that the PDC tinker a little bit with the format already this year, but as far as that first round, I think 1st to 6, okay, it's a format that the PDC professionals will be more used to. That's what they play, all the Euro Tour early rounds and the Players' Championship events. They play that best of 11 format, so they'll be more used to it. But I think we have seen, as you say, players come and cause an upset, beat the PDC representatives at times already this year. So I think at the moment the format is probably the right way to do it. I don't think you'd want to make it too confusing. If you like, you've got 3 nights with the Premier League format. It's going to be a lot more games, and if that is going to be the Premier League format, 8 players, you're cutting it from 16 to 8. I think having it as 16, having 8 regional players gives a lot of players the opportunity, and we're seeing in some events you've got players that have won through a one-day qualifier, and the upcoming one in New Zealand, you've got players that have performed well throughout the year. So it's rewarding players that are playing the affiliate tours as well. So for me, I like the way it's going at the moment, and I know some darts fans, they're not the biggest fans of the World Series, but what the PDC are trying to do with the World Series is take the top players to different places that you wouldn't usually see them play at, and also give players from those places the opportunity to play against those top players. So I think keeping that and giving that many opportunities to 8 players in each event, I think it's a good mix at the moment. And there's been talk about changing these events to ranking events down the line, inviting more players. I think we're probably a little way off that at the moment. So as it is, I think it's working well, and the PDC, they're always assessing and reviewing things, and maybe one day we will see these turn into ranking events. We'll see 32, 64 players, maybe a Euro Tour format with 48. But I think at the moment, as it is, it's working okay.
And we'll have just one more listener question, and this one comes from a friend of the show and someone who you collaborate with a bit inside the WDF. And he asks, who is the hardest working person in darts?
Well, aside from everyone on the weekly Dartscast team, got to give them a shout out. And Andrew Sinclair does a lot of work as well. No, being serious, I think this is an opportunity really to give a shout out to all the people in darts behind the scenes. I'm talking about the volunteers who put in their own free time to help set up tournaments, venues, if they're turning up the night before, if they're turning up in the early hours of the morning, to make sure the boards are all set up, make sure everything's good to go for the players when they turn up. And there'll be people listening that play in local events. They'll know the people that I'm on about, the people that they always see at the events right at the early hours of the morning and right at the end of the day as well, when they're packing things up, and they're the people that make the darts. They're invaluable to the game. So we even see it on our league when we have our finals night. We have all the volunteers, they get a thank you and a round of applause, and rightly so, because they do a lot for us. And even if it's the admin side of things, updating the website with the results the day after. Obviously, I don't enjoy looking at my defeats from the night before, but people that do win their games, they like to see that they've got a win and that the teams are doing well. So they're an important part of the game. And one of our guests next week, Bernie Smith, who played in the World Championship a few years ago, he's going to be back playing in the World Series next week as well. He's someone that when I spoke to him a few days ago, he's someone that's putting in a lot of time off the hockey, helping out darts in New Zealand and helping with those things that sometimes go unnoticed. So them sort of people, they're the people that I think are the hardest working people in darts that you might not think about, but if it weren't for them, a lot of it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I fully echo all of that. I was thinking when you added this question a little late to the spreadsheet, who I would say, and I mean, there's so many of them, and some of them do a lot of really helpful stuff for us. You know, Dave Allen, who since almost the beginning of the podcast has come through for us to help organize interviews, whether it's at a media day for players, but even if it's not at a media day, just we need to get in contact. We don't know how to. He finds a way more often than not to get players, at least on the PDC side. And he does that on top of his work for the PDC dealing with media stuff. And he does such a phenomenal job behind the scenes almost exclusively. But he's one of the people who makes the PDC run and makes it run for the fans. And there's so many other people like him that deserve a shout out. I think you covered most of the bases. I won't go through everyone. I'm flattered that you started with us because I think we're fairly hardworking, but we barely scratch the surface compared to what some people are doing. At least I barely scratch the surface. I don't have the time I used to. When we started this podcast, I think I put in more time than I do now, certainly. But you and Hannah do a phenomenal job. But everyone who does it just for the love of the sport, especially among the fans who do it for the love of the sport. It's not their profession. They do it because they enjoy it. They do deserve a shout out as well. But who is the hardest working? I don't know. There's so many people that keep the sport running. But, well, actually, I do know. It's Mervyn King with his 23 hours of practice a day. Anything else for this week?
Yeah, some great shouts there, and I think we know who Andrew would go for. If you can guess who Andrew would pick as his most hardworking person, then tweet us and let us know. But yeah, just a few things. Want to give a shout out to a couple of our listeners that gave us a review on iTunes. We don't get many reviews on iTunes, so Stressed Mum of Two put 5 stars for this podcast. Spicy 180 said, best darts podcast, fantastic podcast. I especially love listening to this show before an upcoming tournament, as the guys will chop it up beautifully. So hopefully we've chopped it up beautifully for you again this week. And big thanks to everyone for listening as always. Thanks to our guests as well for joining us. And if you're playing darts this week, if you're watching darts this week, you've only got to do one thing, as I always say, and that is, until next time, enjoy the darts.
But I think you have to do one more thing, and that's hang tight until you enjoy the darts. But beyond that, I echo everything Alex said. We'll try to be back next week to recap the second of the 3 World Series events down in the Southern Hemisphere, the last of the Australian ones before the New Zealand one. After that, I will be on holiday a bit in September, so we'll see how much I'm able to be around for that, because there will be a bit of a time change. But if I'm not here in those weeks, I'm sure we'll have someone to keep Alex sane and level-headed. Not that I do a great job of that. But just hang tight and enjoy the darts, and we'll be back next week to discuss the New South Wales. Oh, shouldn't it be middle-aged South Wales at this point? Darts Masters. Hang tight till then.